Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. I never believed in cursed objects or haunted holidays. Christmas to me had always been a season of routine comfort. Predictable lights, familiar music, and the quiet reassurance that nothing truly bad could happen when the world was wrapped in red and green. That belief ended the winter my family bought the tree that bled. It began 3 days before Christmas in the small town of Pine Hollow, Massachusetts, where snowfall softened everything and silence felt intentional. My name is Daniel Harper, and at the time I was 32, recently divorced, and temporarily back in my childhood home to help my parents through my mother's illness. The house had not changed since my teenage years. Same creaking stairs, same drafty windows, same living room where a Christmas tree always stood near the bay window like a ritual anchor holding the season together. That year my father insisted we buy a real tree, despite my mother's weakening condition. He said tradition mattered more than convenience, especially when time felt uncertain. So on a gray afternoon, we drove to Miller Farm, where rows of evergreens stood stiff and identical under a sky the color of old steel. The owner, an elderly man named Harold, watched us from the porch with a look that felt less like curiosity and more like expectation. The tree we chose was taller than usual, almost too tall for our living room. Its branches were dense, heavy with needles, darker than the others around it. When I touched the trunk, a strange chill traveled through my fingers, as if the wood had been left outside longer than the rest. Harold hesitated when we pointed to it. He asked twice if we were sure. My father laughed it off and paid in cash. The first night the tree stood undecorated in the living room, I noticed the smell. Not pine, something metallic and faintly sweet like wet pennies. I assumed it came from the radiator or the old pipes. That night I dreamed of standing in a forest at midnight, surrounded by trees that leaned inward as if listening. When I woke, my hands smelled like iron. Decorating day arrived with quiet determination. My mother sat wrapped in a blanket, watching as my father and I hung lights and ornaments collected over decades. The tree absorbed the lights rather than reflecting them. The glow seemed swallowed by the branches, leaving shadows thicker than they should have been. When I stepped back, I realized the room felt darker than before we plugged it in. That evening, as the house settled and my parents slept, I sat alone on the couch facing the tree. The smell had grown stronger. I leaned forward and saw a thin, dark line forming along the bark near the base. At first, I thought it was sap. Then a single drop slid downward and fell onto the hardwood floor with a soft, wet sound. It was red. I wiped it away with my thumb, expecting stickiness, but it felt warm and thin. My heart raced as another drop followed, then another, slow and deliberate. I pressed my ear to the trunk and swore I heard a distant, muffled sound, like breathing from underwater. I stepped back, shaking, and turned on every light in the room. The bleeding stopped instantly. I told myself it was imagination, exhaustion, stress. I cleaned the floor and went to bed. At exactly midnight, I woke to the sound of dripping slow, rhythmic, steady, from downstairs. When I reached the living room, the tree stood unchanged, yet the floor beneath it was marked with dark stains. The smell was overwhelming now, unmistakable. Blood, fresh and unmistakable. The tree began to tremble slightly, branches rustling though the windows were closed. Then I heard a whisper, not from the room, but from inside the tree itself. A layered sound like many voices pressed together trying to speak through wood. I could not make out words, only emotion, desperation, fear, and something else, hunger. I stumbled backward, knocking into the coffee table. The lights on the tree flickered once, then went out completely. In the darkness, something moved within the branches, bending outward, as if the tree were inhaling. That was the moment I understood this was not a decoration. It was a doorway, and midnight had only just begun. I did not sleep for the rest of that night. I sat on the staircase with the lights on, watching the living room, as if it might move when I looked away. The tree stood still again, silent and dark, as if nothing had happened. By morning, exhaustion convinced me that fear had exaggerated everything. But the stains on the floor remained, no matter how many times I scrubbed them. When my parents woke, I told them a softer version of the truth. I said the tree was leaking sap and that the smell was bothering me. My father frowned and inspected the trunk closely. He said real trees sometimes bled resin when they warmed up indoors. My mother asked me to open a window. Neither of them saw what I saw the night before, or maybe they chose not to. By afternoon, the smell returned stronger than before. It clung to the curtains and the furniture and followed me through the house. When I brushed against the tree, needles stuck to my sleeve and left faint red smears like fingerprints. I hid my panic behind forced smiles, and holiday music turned too loud. That evening, my father invited our neighbor Mrs. Collins over for dinner. She was a widow who lived alone across the street and never missed a chance to talk about the history of Pine Hollow. When she entered the living room, her steps slowed as soon as she saw the tree. Her face lost color. "Where did you get that one?" she asked quietly. When my father told her, she shook her head. She said Miller Farm had been closed for years, except for a small patch of land Harold still maintained. She said people stopped buying trees from him after the accident. "What accident?" my mother asked. Mrs. Collins hesitated, then said a boy had gone missing decades ago during a Christmas tree cutting. They found his boots and coat near one of the evergreens, but never found the body. After that, strange things happened. Animals refusing to go near the grove trees, oozing dark sap branches, bending on their own. She laughed nervously and said it was probably superstition. That night, the bleeding started earlier. At 11:45, I was in the kitchen when I heard the first drop hit the floor, then another. I ran to the living room and watched as thin red streams traced the bark, slowly pooling beneath the tree. The branches shuddered gently like muscles flexing under skin. I grabbed my phone and started recording, my hands shaking so badly the image blurred. As midnight approached, the whispering began clearer this time. Layered voices overlapping. I caught fragments of words. "Help, cold, lost, come close." closer. The tree lights turned on by themselves, glowing dim and sickly. The shadows behind the branches stretched unnaturally across the walls, forming shapes that looked like hands reaching outward. At exactly midnight, the trunk split open with a wet cracking sound. A narrow seam appeared, pulsing slowly as if alive. Blood poured freely, now soaking the rug. The smell was overwhelming. I gagged and backed away, but something compelled me to keep filming. From inside the seam, I saw movement. Pale shapes pressed against the opening, then retreated. A face appeared briefly stretched, and distorted eyes wide with terror before melting back into the wood. I screamed and ran upstairs, waking my parents. By the time we returned, the tree was whole again. No seam, no movement. Only the blood remained. My father stared in disbelief. My mother clutched my arm, whispering prayers. Mrs. Collins arrived minutes later, drawn by the noise. When she saw the blood, she began to cry. She said the trees on Miller Farm were planted over old ground, where the town once buried unclaimed bodies during harsh winters. She said the missing boy had been searching for warmth when he vanished. She said some things remembered. As dawn approached, the bleeding slowed. The tree stood quiet again, but I knew now it was waiting, and Christmas Eve was coming. Christmas Eve arrived, wrapped in a silence that felt heavy and deliberate. Snow fell steadily outside, covering Pine Hollow in a clean white layer that made the stains inside our living room feel even more obscene. No matter how many towels we used, the marks beneath the tree would not fade. They darkened instead, as if feeding on the warmth of the house. My parents barely spoke that day. My father avoided looking at the tree altogether. My mother sat near the window, clutching her rosary, whispering prayers that grew more frantic as the hours passed. I spent the morning researching Miller Farm and Pine Hollow history, digging through archived articles and old town records online. Every search led me back to the same pattern: missing persons, harsh winters, unmarked graves. By afternoon, I found a reference to something older than the town itself. A journal entry from the 1800s written by a traveling preacher described a place in the forest where trees were planted to hide what could not be buried properly. He wrote that the ground there never froze and that blood soaked into it differently than soil should. He warned that cutting those trees invited remembrance. As dusk fell, the tree began to change again. The needles drooped slightly as if weighed down by unseen moisture. A low vibration traveled through the floorboards, pulsing at irregular intervals. I placed my hand on the trunk and felt warmth beneath the bark like a living body. I pulled away, shaking. At 6 in the evening, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then returned, but the tree lights stayed off. My father suggested we remove the tree and take it outside. When he reached for it, the branches snapped outward violently, slashing the air inches from his face. He stumbled backward, pale and silent. We heard knocking at the door. Mrs. Collins stood outside, wrapped in a coat too thin for the cold. She said she could not stay away. She felt drawn to the house. She brought with her an old photograph wrapped in cloth. It showed a group of men standing beside freshly planted evergreens. One of them held a boy by the shoulder. The boy looked terrified. She said said the boy was named Thomas Reed. He went missing Christmas Eve in 1932. His family believed he had wandered into the woods, but the town suspected something darker. He had seen something he was not meant to see near the burial ground. They said the trees were planted to keep him quiet. As night deepened, the whispers returned louder, clearer. They came not only from the tree, but from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Voices overlapping, pleading, accusing, remembering. The smell of blood filled the house, thick and suffocating. At 11:30, the tree began to bleed again, heavier than before. Streams ran down the trunk, soaking gifts we had placed beneath it. Wrapping paper dissolved, turning red and brown. The vibration intensified, shaking ornaments loose. They shattered on the floor like fragile bones. At 11:55, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the inside of the windows. My breath fogged the air. The tree lights flickered on dim and uneven. Shadows twisted into figures around the room, standing too tall, bending at unnatural angles. The seam appeared again in the trunk, wider this time. It pulsed open and closed like a wound breathing. From within came a sound that was no longer whispering, but crying. A child's voice calling for his mother, calling for help, calling for warmth. My mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing. My father stood frozen, unable to move. Mrs. Collins screamed that it wanted to be remembered, that it wanted to come home. At midnight, the seam tore fully open. What emerged was not a body, but many impressions layered together, faces pressed against bark hands, reaching mouths opening and closing in silent screams. Blood poured freely, flooding the floor. The house groaned as if sharing their pain. I realized then the tree was not haunted by one soul, but by all of them. Everyone buried, forgotten, hidden beneath winter soil. Christmas was when they were strongest, when warmth and memory returned. The voices spoke as one. Remember us. The lights went out. In the darkness, something stepped forward. And Christmas Eve was only beginning. I do not remember screaming, but my throat burned afterward as if I had. The darkness swallowed the living room so completely that even the windows vanished. The only thing I could hear was breathing, not ours, but something deeper, slower, as if the house itself had lungs. A shape separated from the tree. At first, it was only a suggestion, a distortion where the branches should have been. Then it stepped forward, dragging itself free with a sound like wet roots tearing from soil. It was tall and thin, its surface a patchwork of bark and skin veins threading through wood grain. Where a face should have been, there were many impressions layered together, mouths opening and closing, eyes blinking out of sync. My father found his voice and shouted for it to stop. The thing turned toward him and the impressions shifted, aligning briefly into a single face, a boy's face, pale and cracked with frost. Thomas Reed. He raised an arm and the air grew heavy, pressing us down. Ornaments lifted from the floor and rattled against the walls. The thing took another step, and the house groaned, beams creaking under a weight that was not physical. Mrs. Collins dropped to her knees, sobbing. She begged it for forgiveness, begged it to take her instead. The face changed again. older, younger, many at once. The voice that came from it was layered but clear. We were left. The temperature dropped further. Ice crawled across the walls, blooming outward in delicate patterns that cut skin when touched. My mother collapsed, gasping, unable to breathe. I ran to her, but the floor beneath my feet felt soft like soaked earth. I realized the tree had brought the ground with it. The burial ground, the forgotten place beneath Miller Farm, was bleeding into our home. The thing moved toward the hallway where the bedrooms were, toward warmth, toward memory. I stepped in front of it without thinking, my legs shaking so badly I nearly fell. It stopped inches from me. The impressions leaned forward, pressing close. I smelled soil and blood and coal. Images flooded my mind, unbidden men digging in frozen ground lanterns. Shaking a boy, struggling voices, arguing about necessity and silence. The ground closing over him while he was still alive. I screamed at them all, not just the thing, but the town, the past, the silence. I told it we remembered now that we knew. The impressions rippled in confusion. The pressure eased slightly. Behind me, my father pulled my mother upright. Mrs. Collins whispered that remembrance was not enough. It wanted return. A sound rose from outside engines' tires on snow. Headlights swept across the windows. The police. Someone must have called during the chaos. The thing turned toward the light and recoiled, hissing steam rising from its surface. It retreated a step back toward the tree. The impressions shifted, frantic, overlapping. The voices cried out in anger, fear, desperation. Do not leave us. The tree roots burst through the floor, splintering wood and tile, anchoring it deeper. The thing fused back into the trunk, folding inward like a wound closing. The lights flickered on briefly, then went out again. By the time the police burst through the door, the living room was empty except for the tree and the destruction. Blood soaked everything. Frost coated the walls. My parents clung to each other, shaking. Mrs. Collins sat staring at the tree, whispering apologies. The officers asked questions, took statements, but their eyes kept drifting back to the tree. One of them touched the bark and jerked his hand away, swearing. He said it felt warm. They ordered us out of the house, declaring it unsafe. As we stood outside, wrapped in blankets, watching snowfall, the tree lights flickered on by themselves, visible through the window. Inside the trunk, something shifted, and I knew it was not finished. Not until it was taken home. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve in the back of a police cruiser parked across the street, watching our house like it belonged to someone else. Yellow tape went up quickly, fluttering against the snow. Neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering theories that never came close to the truth. Pine Hollow had always been good at pretending it did not see things. An inspector from the town arrived just before dawn. He was an older man with tired eyes who introduced himself as Richard Lowell. He asked careful questions and took careful notes, but his gaze lingered on the house with something that looked like recognition. When I mentioned Miller Farm, his pen paused for just a second. The house was declared uninhabitable until further notice. We were taken to a small motel on the edge of town where the heater rattled and the walls were thin enough to hear strangers breathe. None of us slept. stopped. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces pressing through bark, mouths opening in silent accusation. Early Christmas morning, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Collins. She said she remembered more. She said the town had held meetings after Thomas Reed disappeared, meetings that were never recorded. She said Miller Farm had been chosen because the ground there did not freeze, and because Harold family had always been willing to keep quiet. Against police advice, I drove out there alone. Snow covered the road leading into the grove, muting sound. The trees stood in neat rows, identical and wrong. At the center of the patch was a clearing darker than the rest, where the ground seemed damp despite the cold. Harold waited for me on the porch, as if he knew I was coming. He looked smaller than before, fragile like the wind might take him. When I confronted him, he did not deny it. He said the town had asked his father to plant trees to hide what could not be explained. He said the ground kept what was given to it, but sometimes it wanted more. He said Christmas was when the soil warmed just enough to remember. That night at the motel, the power went out briefly. When it returned, the television in our room flickered on by itself, showing static that resolved into shapes, faces. I turned it off, shaking. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering tracks, erasing evidence. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. A single message, "Bring us home." I looked out the window and saw lights moving in the distance down the road toward town, toward our house. The tree lights. I knew then the tree was not bound to one place anymore. It was calling, and Pine Hollow was finally going to answer. Christmas Day had just begun. By late morning Christmas Day, Pine Hollow no longer felt like a town celebrating a holiday. It felt like a place bracing for a storm it could not see. Sirens echoed in the distance, not continuously, but in short bursts, as if even the emergency responders were unsure where to go. Snow continued to fall soft and steady, burying the night beneath a clean surface that lied. The first disappearance was reported just after noon. A woman named Linda Myers had gone out to check her mailbox and never came back. Her footprints ended halfway down her driveway, as if she had simply lifted into the air. Police searched the surrounding yards and woods, but found nothing. No blood, no signs of struggle. Only a single pine needle stuck upright in the snow where she vanished. By early afternoon, there were 3 more. I stood in the motel room watching the local news channel as the anchors struggled to keep their voices calm. They spoke of power outages, isolated incidents, weather-related complications. They did not show the footage I had sent them the night before. They did not show the blood or the tree or the faces. Pine Hollow was protecting itself the only way it knew how, by refusing to speak. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. Closer. The word vibrated in my bones. I felt it pull at me like a tide. When I closed my eyes, I could see the tree lights drifting through the streets, slow and deliberate, stopping at certain houses, lingering like a finger tracing names on a list. My parents wanted to leave town. I wanted to run, but I knew leaving would not stop it. The tree was not hunting randomly. It was remembering, and memory had an address. I drove back toward our neighborhood. Despite the police barricades slipping through a side street, I knew from childhood. Snow muffled my footsteps as I approached the house. The yellow tape hung slack, torn in places. The front door stood open. Inside, the air was warmer than it should have been. The tree was still there, rooted deeper than before its trunk, thicker veins pulsing visibly beneath the bark. Blood stained the walls, now forming shapes like maps, branching lines connecting names. The whispering filled the room, constant and insistent. This time, I could understand every word. They named people. I recognized some of them, town officials, business owners, neighbors who had lived in Pine Hollow for generations. Names spoken with accusation and grief. Names that ended with a single word. Remember. The tree lights brightened, and through the window I saw movement outside. People drawn by the glow stepping out of their houses, confused, entranced, walking barefoot into the snow. The lights paused at each one briefly before moving on. I realized then it was not taking them physically, it was taking their warmth, their breath, their life, leaving behind empty spaces and unanswered questions. A scream echoed down the street, then another. The lights moved faster now, weaving between houses like a living thing. I backed away as the tree trunk split again, but this time nothing stepped out. Instead, roots surged forward, cracking through the floor, racing toward the door. The tree was spreading. Police sirens wailed closer now. I heard shouting commands, confusion. The lights surged toward the sound, toward authority, toward the heart of the town. I ran. As I fled, I looked back once and saw the tree lights lift from the house, drifting upward, combining into a single blazing shape, hovering above Pine Hollow like a crown of thorns made of needles and blood. Christmas bells began to ring from the church down the street, automated and cheerful and horribly wrong. The tree had found its congregation, and Pine Hollow was about to remember everything. By nightfall, Christmas Day no longer existed in Pine Hollow. Time felt fractured, stretched, thin, and wrong. The snow had stopped falling, but the air still shimmered with cold that burned the lungs. The town was sealed off, state police blocking the main roads, lights flashing red and blue against the white silence. No one was allowed in, and no one was allowed out. From the hill above town, I watched Pine Hollow change. The glowing mass of tree lights hovered lower now, drifting street by street. Wherever it passed, people slowed, stopped, and turned toward it, as if hearing a familiar voice. Some cried, some smiled. A few walked willingly into the glow and never came back out. When the lights moved on, only empty clothes remained collapsed in the snow, warm steam rising briefly before fading. My phone buzzed constantly, now messages stacking one after another from the same unknown number. You hear us, you know us, you remember. The final message came moments later. You belong to us too. I dropped the phone. My name had not been spoken yet, but I felt it circling closer with every passing minute. My family had lived in Pine Hollow for generations. My grandfather had served on the town council during the winters mentioned in the records. I suddenly understood why my father had always avoided stories about the old grove. I found my parents sheltering in the basement of the motel with other evacuees. The air was thick with fear and whispered prayers. When I told them what I had realized, my father went pale. He sat down heavily and admitted the truth he had carried for decades. His father had known about the burial ground. He had signed papers authorizing the planting of trees. He said it was to protect the town from panic. He said no one meant for the boy to die. They told themselves that silence was mercy. The building shook above us, glass rattling as the lights dimmed. Screams echoed from outside, cut short one by one. The glow had reached the motel. People began to rise from the floor, turning toward the stairs. Eyes unfocused, faces slack. My mother grabbed my hand, digging her nails into my skin, begging me not to leave her. I felt the pull stronger now, undeniable, a tide dragging at my chest. I ran. I burst through the emergency exit into the freezing night. The glow hovered above the parking lot, tendrils of light extending downward, brushing faces, hands, memories. When one touched my shoulder, the world flooded white. I saw everything. The grove in its first winter, men digging through frozen ground, bodies wrapped in cloth lowered quickly without names, Thomas Reed crying until his voice failed, the trees planted as markers, as seals, as lies, Christmas after Christmas feeding warmth and memory into the soil, strengthening what slept beneath. The light recoiled as I screamed. I told it. The truth was out. That silence was broken. I told it. Pine Hollow remembered now. The voices answered not in anger, but in grief. Too late. The glow surged upward, splitting into countless strands, racing toward the grove, toward Miller Farm. The source. I understood then what it wanted. Not vengeance, not destruction, completion. It wanted the ground opened, the dead returned, the lie undone. Sirens wailed as I drove through abandoned streets toward the forest. Behind me, the town fell dark, one light at a time. Ahead, the grove pulsed red beneath the snow. Christmas night was far from over, and I was running straight into its heart. The road to Miller Farm was nearly invisible beneath the snow, but I knew every curve by memory. I had driven it as a child, without understanding what lay beyond the trees. Now the forest ahead pulsed faintly red, like a wound refusing to close. The glow guided me forward, patient and certain. As I stepped out of the car, the air changed. It was warmer here, unnaturally so, and thick with the smell of earth and iron. The snow thinned with every step toward the grove, until bare ground showed through dark and wet. The trees stood taller than I remembered, their branches heavy and bowed inward, as if burdened by years of listening. Voices followed me between the trunks, not loud, not threatening, just constant. They spoke names, dates, small, forgotten details of lives cut short. A man who froze walking home from the mill, a woman buried without family, a boy who cried until the ground took his breath. At the center of the grove, the earth had split open. The hole was wide and deep, its edges smooth, as if shaped by hands that knew exactly how much to take. Roots twisted around it like veins pulsing slowly. From within came light, not bright, but steady, illuminating layers of soil and bone cloth and wood. stacked carefully over decades. Harold stood at the edge, waiting. He looked older than when I last saw him, his shoulders bent under a weight that had nothing to do with age. He said nothing as I approached, only nodded, as if confirming what he already knew. He told me the town had always sent someone back eventually, someone who remembered enough. He said the grove was not cursed at first. It was chosen. The ground here never froze, because something beneath it stayed warm. The dead were placed here during winters when the cemetery could not be open. The trees were planted to mark the place and to feed it warmth each Christmas through light, memory, and ritual. But when Thomas Reed tried to run, they panicked. They buried him alive to keep the secret. The ground learned hunger that night. The glow intensified behind me. The strands of light descended into the grove, settling into the roots, the trunks, the open earth. The voices rose together, no longer scattered, but focused. "Open it," Harold said. The town had tried everything, burning, cutting, flooding, but nothing stopped the remembering. Only silence delayed it. He said the grove wanted what was taken from it: acknowledgement, release, and return. I stepped closer to the pit and felt heat rise against my face like standing over an open furnace. Images flooded my mind. Uninvited, the boy reaching upward, fingers clawing through soil, nails, breaking voices above him, arguing, praying, lying. I fell to my knees, retching. The ground trembled. Roots shifted, widening the opening. The bones below began to move, rearranging themselves, climbing toward the surface, drawn by the light. I realized then the truth. They did not want revenge. They wanted to be buried properly, to be seen, named, mourned. They wanted the lie undone. Harold handed me a shovel. He said someone from the town had to do it, someone whose blood carried the signature of those who signed the papers. My hands shook as I took it. The glow surged brighter, urging me on. I dug. Each shovelful revealed remains wrapped in rotted cloth, brittle and fragile. I spoke their names as they came to me, pulled from the whispers. With every name, the pressure eased slightly, the air growing lighter. But then the earth convulsed violently. A shape rose from the pit, larger than before, formed of roots, bone, and bark. Faces pressed along its surface, screaming in terror and fury. It was the hunger given form. Harold shouted that I had gone too far, that opening the ground without finishing the rite would wake it fully. The thing surged upward, towering over us, blocking the sky. I stood trembling, shovel raised, and understood what it wanted now. Not just remembrance, balance. The glow poured into the pit, illuminating the remains below, waiting. I stepped forward, knowing there was only one way to finish what the town had begun. Christmas night demanded a final offering, and the grove waited for my answer. I did not make the choice all at once. It unfolded in small, quiet decisions that felt heavier than any single act. I stepped to the edge of the pit and listened. Beneath the roar of the entity and the cracking roots, there was a softer sound, like wind through leaves, like breath returning after a long-held pause. It was waiting to be finished. Harold shouted for me to stop. He said the grove would take more than it promised. He said the town had tried offerings before animals, fire, even blood. Nothing had satisfied it, but he was wrong about one thing. None of those had been truth. I raised my voice and began to speak the names again, not just the ones I had pulled from whispers, but the ones written in town records, the ones my grandfather had signed away with a pen. I spoke dates, places, families. I spoke apologies that were not mine alone. With each name, the ground steadied and the light softened. The entity recoiled, screaming without sound. Its faces twisted not in rage now, but in fear. It lunged, and a root lashed my leg, dragging me toward the pit. Pain flared hot and sharp. I slammed the shovel into the root again and again until sap and blood sprayed the snow. I fell to my knees at the edge. The heat was unbearable. I understood then what balance meant. Not another life taken, but a life returned. A witness bound to the place until the lie was undone completely. I cut my palm and let my blood fall into the pit. The ground hissed, steaming as it touched. The light surged, blinding white, then dimmed to a steady glow. The bones below settled gently, rearranging into proper forms, wrapped in fresh earth, as if time itself were correcting. The entity shrank, unraveling back into roots and bark, collapsing inward toward the pit. Its voices blended into one last sound, not angry, not hungry, but relieved. Thank you. The ground closed, slowly sealing itself. The roots withdrew, retreating beneath the soil. The forest exhaled. Snow began to fall again, covering the scar with clean white silence. I woke hours later at dawn, lying at the edge of the grove. Harold was gone. The pit was gone. Only the trees remained standing straighter than before, branches lifted toward the sky. In town, the lights flickered back on, one by one. The glow above Pine Hollow faded. People returned to themselves, confused, exhausted, alive. The missing were found wandering miles away, cold but breathing. Our house stood empty. The tree was gone, roots torn free, leaving a hole in the floor that led nowhere. No blood remained, no stain, but I feel it still. When Christmas lights turn on, I hear whispers beneath the music. When the ground warms in winter, I smell iron and earth. I know the truth is never buried forever. Somewhere beneath Pine Hollow, the dead are finally sleeping, and someone is always listening. The weeks after Christmas passed with an uneasy calm that felt rehearsed. Pine Hollow returned to routines as if order alone could erase what had happened. Snowplows cleared the roads, shops reopened, people smiled too quickly and spoke too softly. No one mentioned the missing hours or the lights in the sky. Official reports blamed a gas leak, mass hysteria, electrical faults. The town accepted these answers because they were easier than the truth. I stayed. I told myself it was to help my parents recover, but I knew the real reason. I needed to watch the ground. I needed to listen. Some nights I drove past Miller Farm and parked at the edge of the grove. The trees stood quiet now, ordinary evergreens catching moonlight. But when the wind shifted, I heard faint movement below, like soil settling after a long disturbance. My father aged quickly after Christmas. He avoided mirrors and slept poorly, waking from dreams where hands reached up through the floor. My mother grew quieter but steadier, lighting candles each night and saying prayers for names she would not explain. Guilt had finally found a voice in our house. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than anyone remembered, leaving patches of dark earth exposed. In the forest near Miller Farm, the ground stayed warm long after frost should have returned. Flowers bloomed there, out of season, pale and colorless, their petals thin as skin. Then the first tree was planted. It appeared in the town square overnight, decorated with lights and ornaments, as if someone had started the season early by mistake. No one admitted to putting it there. The mayor ordered it removed. But when workers touched it, the needles cut their hands, drawing thin lines of blood. The tree was gone by morning, leaving only damp ground beneath it. More followed, a small one near the school, another beside the church, always overnight, always bleeding slightly at the base, just enough to stain the soil, always gone by morning. People stopped reporting them. They stopped asking questions. I began receiving messages again, not on my phone, but in dreams, short and quiet. "We are not finished. Neither are you." I realized then what the grove had done. It had closed the wound, but it had not erased the memory. The dead were at rest, but remembrance was now rooted deeper than before, spread through the town like seeds carried by wind. Every Christmas after that, Pine Hollow plants more trees than it needs. They say it is tradition. They say it is for beauty. They never decorate them fully. The lights stay dim. The ornaments are simple. And every year someone new hears whispering beneath the carols. I tell this story now because I know what happens when silence returns. The ground warms. The trees remember. And someone always pays the price for forgetting. If you ever find yourself in a town that plants trees to hide its past, listen closely at midnight. If the ground smells like iron and the lights flicker red, walk away. Some Christmas traditions are not meant to survive, and some stories do not end. They wait. I thought the story had ended because that was what Pine Hollow needed to believe. But stories like this do not close cleanly. They seep. They wait for the right conditions. And by the next winter, those conditions return. December came early and harsh. The cold arrived before Thanksgiving, sealing the ground with frost thicker than usual. People said it was just weather patterns shifting, but I felt it in my bones. The colder it became, the warmer the soil near the old places felt beneath my feet. Memory was moving again. The first sign was the smell. It crept through town late one night, faint and metallic, drifting through heating vents and open chimneys. People complained about bad pipes or road salt. I knew better. Iron and earth meant the ground was waking. I drove to Miller Farm at dawn and found fresh footprints circling the grove barefoot, and child-sized ending abruptly at the tree line. The town council held an emergency meeting behind closed doors. I was not invited, but my father was. He returned home, pale, shaking, and would not meet my eyes. That night, he finally told me the rest of the truth. There were more names, more winters, more bodies. The grove was only the largest place, not the only one. Pine Hollow had buried its dead wherever the ground allowed it during harsh seasons. Under barns, under foundations, beneath what would later become playgrounds and parking lots. The trees had been a solution, not a mistake. They fed warmth and silence into the soil year after year. This time the trees did not wait for Christmas. A sapling erupted through the asphalt of the grocery store parking lot, splitting concrete like paper. Blood seeped from its base, pooling around tires. Another burst through the floor of the elementary school gym, cracking polished wood. Classes were dismissed early, but no one explained why. The whispers returned louder than before. No longer confined to night. I heard them in daylight, beneath conversations, beneath engines, beneath music. They spoke fragments, not names now, but instructions. Dig, open, remember. The town tried to remove the trees, but equipment failed. Blades dulled, snapped, caught on something that pulled back. Workers quit refusing to go near the roots. The trees bled more when disturbed, staining snow pink and brown. One evening, the power failed across Pine Hollow. In the darkness, Christmas lights flickered on all at once throughout town, even in houses that had not decorated yet. The glow pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. I received a message written this time in condensation on my bathroom mirror. You opened one door. There are others. I understood then the grove had never been the source. It had been a valve. By opening it, I had released pressure that spread everywhere the ground had been asked to keep a secret. I gathered maps, old records, anything I could find marking winters and deaths. The pattern was unmistakable. Pine Hollow was built on layered graves, and the trees were only the surface expression. At midnight, the whispers rose into a single sound, vibrating through walls and streets. The ground trembled. Trees across town began to lean inward, their branches creaking as if listening. I stood outside in the cold, watching lights glow beneath snow, knowing what was coming. This time there would be no single place to finish it. Pine Hollow had to remember all of itself, and winter was only beginning. The digging began at dawn. There was no announcement, no press release, no explanation given to the people watching from behind police tape. Heavy machinery rolled into Pine Hollow under a gray sky and stopped at places no one wanted to name. The old playground behind the library, the unused baseball field near the river, the empty lot where the hardware store once stood. Places everyone remembered but never questioned. I stood with a clipboard I did not deserve, holding maps I had drawn myself. Every mark felt like an accusation. Town officials avoided my eyes as if blame could still be outrun. But the ground was done waiting. The first shovel struck bone less than 3 feet down. Work stopped immediately. Silence spread outward, heavy and absolute. When the remains were uncovered, they were small, wrapped in cloth, long decayed, but unmistakable. A child, no marker, no record, just dirt pressed tight around a secret that had been told too many times to stay buried. People began to cry, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something leaking out at last. As the day wore on, more sights were open. Beneath the baseball field lay 3 adults laid side by side, hands bound with rotted rope. Beneath the parking lot, a woman curled inward, as if trying to keep warm. Each discovery was followed by the same thing: the smell, iron and earth, and then the whispers. They were no longer angry. They were guiding. Dig here, not there. Careful. Workers reported hands steadying their shovels, voices correcting their movements. No one ran, no one screamed. It felt wrong, but it also felt inevitable, like gravity reasserting itself. Trees throughout town reacted as the dead were uncovered. Branches lifted, straightening. Saplings that had burst through concrete stopped bleeding, their bark darkening to normal brown. The lights that had haunted Pine Hollow flickered and dimmed. But something else was happening. As the ground opened, the cold deepened unnaturally. Frost spread across streets and walls in sharp, crystalline patterns. Breath turned white even indoors. The ground gave up its warmth reluctantly, as if losing a shield. By nightfall, snow began to fall again, thick and heavy, erasing the day work as quickly as it had begun. The whispering softened, replaced by a low hum, vibrating through the town like a distant engine. I understood then the dead had not only been feeding on warmth, they had been holding something back. At midnight, the temperature plunged. Pipes burst, windows cracked, power lines snapped under the weight of ice. Pine Hollow went dark again. In the silence, a new sound emerged from beneath the town. Not voices, not whispers, but movement, vast and slow, like something shifting its position after being confined too long. I felt it beneath my feet. The trees leaned inward again, not in hunger this time, but in warning. Whatever the ground had been keeping buried was no longer content to sleep, and Pine Hollow had only just begun to pay its debt. The sound beneath Pine Hollow grew louder with each passing hour. It was not a roar or an explosion, but a deep grinding shift, like stone dragged slowly across stone. The kind of sound you felt through your feet before you ever heard it. People described it differently: a train passing underground, a distant earthquake, thunder trapped beneath ice. I knew better. It was something turning over in its sleep. Emergency shelters filled quickly. Families crowded into schools and churches huddled under blankets as heaters failed one by one. The cold was no longer natural. It cut through walls and bone alike, stealing breath and leaving fingers numb within minutes. Whatever warmth the dead had been holding back was gone now, and something far older had claimed the space it left behind. I met with the remaining town officials in the darkened library using flashlights and candles. Their faces looked older than their years, etched by fear and regret. No one argued anymore. Denial had frozen solid and cracked. What remained was desperation. Records were spread across a long table: maps, journals, deeds, letters written by men who believed paper could outlast guilt. We traced the earliest settlement back before Pine Hollow had a name. The The first families had chosen this place for the same reason the grove had been chosen later. The ground never fully froze. Heat seeped upward even in the worst winters. They had mistaken a warning for a blessing. An entry from a surveyor journal described warm soil and a low hum beneath the land. He wrote that animals avoided sleeping there and that fires burned strangely bright. Another entry months later mentioned a collapse, a pit that opened overnight and swallowed part of a camp. No bodies were recovered. The pit was filled and marked with stones. Trees were planted, always trees. The sound outside intensified, rattling shelves and knocking books to the floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere a child began to cry, then another, until the room filled with it. I realized then what Pine Hollow had truly been built on. Not graves, not secrets, a lid. The town was not haunted by the dead. It had been protected by them. As the last burial sites were opened, the dead were freed. In doing so, we had removed the weight holding something else down, something that did not want remembrance or justice. It wanted out. The whispers returned briefly, not pleading now, but warning. Run! The ground split open along the main street, cracking asphalt like glass. Steam poured upward, carrying the smell of sulfur and iron. The temperature dropped even further, forming ice instantly along the edges of the fissure. From below came a glow, not red this time, but a dull amber, like fire seen through thick smoke. The sound resolved into rhythm, a slow, massive breathing. Church bells rang once, then shattered as the steeple cracked. Trees across town bent violently toward the fissure, their roots straining against frozen soil. I stood at the edge of the break, watching heat and cold battle violently in the air. I understood then the final truth. Pine Hollow had never belonged to the living or the dead. It had been claimed long before either arrived, and Christmas had only ever been the time when the lock weakened. The thing beneath the town inhaled deeply, and the ground answered. The fissure widened through the night, not with violence, but with patience. It opened the way a mouth does when it knows it will be fed. Steam rolled upward in heavy curtains, frosting eyelashes and turning hair brittle with ice. The amber glow pulsed beneath the town like a buried sun counting breaths. Evacuation orders came too late. Roads buckled and bridges iced over. Cars stalled. Where heat met cold and engines seized, people moved on foot in clumps, following flashlights that shook in numb hands. Every few minutes, the ground shuddered and the trees leaned again, their branches creaking like old doors opening. I stayed near the fissure because running felt dishonest. The whispers had stopped. In their absence, a pressure filled my head, a sense of being observed by something that did not need eyes. I remembered the journals, the surveyor who mistook warmth for mercy. I remembered the dead holding the line for centuries, fed by lights and songs and lies. At dawn, the thing beneath Pine Hollow spoke without words. The air compressed, sound thinned, thoughts aligned into a single understanding. It wanted the lid restored, not sealed by silence, but by weight. By choice, the officials gathered again, fewer now, their faces rimed with frost. We argued for minutes that felt like hours. No one wanted to say what the ground was asking for because saying it would make it real. The old methods had failed. Trees alone were not enough anymore. The dead were at rest. There was no longer a buffer. A structure was needed, a living anchor. The fissure exhaled, and a shape rose just enough to be seen. Not a body, not a monster, a geometry of heat and shadow that bent light around itself. Roots and stone lifted toward it instinctively as if recognizing a center of gravity. When it breathed, the cold deepened everywhere else. I understood then why Christmas mattered. Warmth and memory weakened the lock, but sacrifice forged it. Not blood, commitment. The town had been built to hold this thing down. Now the town had to choose to become that hold again. We worked through the morning with numb hands and borrowed courage. We dragged steel beams and concrete forms from collapsed sites toward the fissure. We wired generators that sputtered but held. The plan was crude and terrifying. Build a cap heavy enough to press the ground back into itself and bind it with something that would last. Names. We spoke them as we worked. Every recovered name. Every winter lost. We carved them into wet concrete with knives and keys and frozen fingers. We sang carols off key to keep rhythm and warmth. We told the truth out loud where it could be heard. The amber glow dimmed as the cap took shape. The breathing slowed, but the ground asked for one more thing. Someone had to stay, a witness bound to the place to tend the lock when seasons turned, a keeper who would not look away when lights came out and songs grew thin. My father stepped forward, so did I. We argued without shouting. He had carried the guilt longer. I had opened the door. The ground did not choose between us. It waited. I stayed. By nightfall, the cap was set. The fissure closed beneath it with a sound like a long sigh. The cold eased. Power flickered back unevenly. People collapsed where they stood and slept. I took my place at the edge of the grove where new trees had been planted in careful lines. I felt the warmth beneath the soil settle into a steady pulse. The thing slept again, held by weight and witness and names spoken true. When Christmas came, the next year, the lights stayed dim. The songs stayed slow. I stayed awake. Someone always must. Life returned to Pine Hollow the way a bruise fades, not gone, but quieter. Weeks passed, then months. Snow melted cautiously, revealing streets stitched with cracks that crews patched without questions. The concrete cap settled and held. The grove grew straighter every day, as if relieved of a burden it had carried too long. People called it recovery. I called it vigilance. I moved into a small cabin at the edge of the grove, with a clear view of the trees and the place beneath them. The town paid me a stipend and never said what it was for. They preferred titles that sounded ordinary: caretaker, groundskeeper, maintenance. I accepted the work and the silence because both were necessary. At night, I walked the perimeter listening. The warmth below stayed steady like a heart at rest. When the wind carried sound, it was leaves and owls and nothing more. Still, I wrote everything down. Dates, temperatures, the color of the lights. the way the soil smelled after rain. Patterns mattered now. My parents left town in the spring. My mother kissed my forehead and said she understood. My father hugged me too long, then pressed a small notebook into my hand. Inside were names he had never said aloud, written carefully in ink that had faded from being read too often. I added them to the record and buried a copy beneath the first tree. Summer came, and with it a test. A heat wave settled over the valley, turning nights restless and long. The warmth stirred the ground, and the hum returned, faint but present. I dimmed the lights across town at dusk and asked people to stay home. No one complained. They remembered enough to trust me. The hum subsided. In autumn, the trees shed needles thick as a carpet. Beneath them, the soil cooled properly for the first time in memory. I thought perhaps this was what healing looked like. Then December arrived. The decorations went up slower that year. Fewer strings of lights, no inflatable figures. The carols returned, but softer and later in the evening. On Christmas Eve, I walked the grove alone with a lantern, counting breaths, matching the pulse below. At midnight, the lantern flickered. The warmth rose slightly, and I smelled iron, faint as a memory. I placed my hand on the ground and spoke the names again, all of them, including my own. The warmth steadied, the iron faded, the night released me. That was when I noticed the new sapling. It stood just beyond the ring where we had planted the last line. A thin evergreen no taller than my shoulder, decorated with a single unlit bulb hanging from a branch. I had not planted it. The soil around it was damp and warm. I knelt and listened. There were no whispers, only a question without words. I understood then that vigilance was not a sentence, but a conversation. The lock would hold as long as someone answered when the ground asked. I removed the bulb and buried it deep beneath the roots. I added a marker stone with no date and no epitaph, just a line. Here we remember. When dawn came, the sapling looked like all the others. Somewhere beneath Pine Hollow, something shifted and settled back into sleep. Christmas morning arrived, pale and cold and ordinary. Children opened gifts. Bells rang. Lights stayed dim. I stayed awake, and I will keep staying awake as long as the ground remembers warmth and the trees remember blood. Stories end when someone stops listening. I am not finished listening. The first crack in vigilance came quietly, the way failures usually do. It arrived as kindness. Her name was Emily Shaw. She moved into Pine Hollow in late November with a rented truck and a hopeful smile. The kind people wear when they believe small towns mean safety. She was a teacher newly hired by the district, grateful for the job, grateful for the quiet. She waved when we passed on the road and brought me bread still warm one evening, saying she had baked too much. I warned her gently without explaining. I told her to keep her lights low in winter and to listen more than she spoke. She laughed, thinking I was charmingly eccentric, and thanked me anyway. Kindness makes people careless. The nights grew longer. I kept my rounds and wrote my notes. The ground stayed mostly calm, though I felt a new irregularity in the pulse, like a skipped beat. The sapling I had found last year leaned slightly toward the road now, as if curious. Emily loved Christmas. She decorated early hanging bright strings across her porch and a wreath heavy with red ornaments. On the first night she turned everything on. The hum rose beneath my feet, sharp and immediate. I drove to town and asked her to dim them. She agreed apologetically and promised to do better. For a few nights she did. Then the snowstorm came. Power lines fell across the valley, plunging Pine Hollow into darkness, except for a few generators. The cold deepened, and people gathered indoors, sharing heat and stories. Emily invited neighbors over, lighting candles and singing carols to pass the time. I felt the ground stir as warmth pooled above it. At midnight I smelled iron. I ran to the grove and pressed my hand to the soil. The pulse had quickened. Beneath the cap, something shifted, testing weight and patience. I spoke the names again, steady and slow, until the warmth receded. By morning, the storm passed and power returned. The town sighed and reset. I thought we had escaped another test. 2 nights later, Emily knocked on my door, pale and shaking. She said her Christmas tree was leaking. She said the water in the stand had turned red. I followed her home with dread thick in my throat. The tree stood tall and bright in her living room, decorated with lights too white, too eager. At the base, the carpet was damp and dark. The smell was unmistakable. I told her to leave the house immediately. She hesitated, wanting explanations. The tree shuddered as if impatient. The bulb strings flickered and the room dimmed. A thin line split the bark and a single drop fell, striking the floor like a clock tick. Emily whispered my name, though I had never told it to her. I understood then the ground was not simply responding to light and warmth. It was choosing voices, new ones. I grabbed the tree and dragged it outside, ignoring the cuts as needles sliced my hands. The bleeding slowed once it touched snow. I buried the stand deep beneath frozen soil and carved names into the ice with my keys until my fingers numbed. The night settled again, but something had changed. The sapling at the grove leaned farther now, reaching. The ground did not fully sleep afterward. It listened. Emily left town within the week. She did not say goodbye. Others began to ask questions again. Vigilance is not a wall. It is a balance. And Pine Hollow was beginning to tilt. The calling began with my name. It was not a voice the way people imagine voices. It arrived as pressure behind the eyes, as a tightening in the chest that shaped thought into sound. Daniel, the ground did not shout or whisper. It simply assumed I was listening because I always had. After Emily left Pine Hollow, I doubled my rounds. I dimmed lights personally when I had to. I asked for generators to be shut down earlier than necessary. I slept in short shifts and dreamed of roots tracing maps beneath my skin. The sapling by the grove leaned farther each night, its needles glossy and dark. The first spoken name that was not mine belonged to a boy. Evan Miller was 8 years old and lived 3 houses down from the school. He loved trains and left them running in slow circles on his bedroom floor while snow fell outside. On a quiet evening, his mother heard him talking to someone in the yard. When she opened the door, the cold rushed in and the boy was gone. They found his footprints leading to the grove. They stopped at the marker stone where I had buried the bulb. The soil there was warm. The town did not panic. Not yet. Panic requires surprise, and Pine Hollow had learned anticipation. Police searched with dogs that refused to cross the tree line. Drones lost signal above the grove and fell from the sky like birds shot mid-flight. By dawn, the search was suspended, and the questions began to turn toward me. I told them the truth without ornament. I told them the ground listened and learned. I told them lights and warmth and voices fed it choices. I told them it had begun selecting. The council asked me what it wanted. A keeper does not answer that question quickly. I said it wanted continuity. Someone to hear and respond when the balance shifted. Someone young enough to last. That night, the calling changed tone. It no longer pressed only on me. It reached outward, brushing thoughts in nearby houses, testing resonance. I felt it graze Evan Mother as she slept, then pass on dissatisfied. It paused at the school, then moved away. At midnight, the sapling split its bark, and a thin line of red traced down into the snow. Not blood exactly, something thinner, warmer, alive. I dug around the roots and found an object wrapped in cloth. A toy train engine, rusted and cold. Evan favorite. The ground had taken him, but it had not finished speaking. I stood there shaking and understood the choice before me. Keeper's age, vigilance phrase. The ground seeks successors when it senses weakness. It does not care about fairness. It cares about listening. I made a promise out loud where the soil could hear. I would not let it choose a child. I would widen the circle instead. The next days I trained volunteers quietly. People who had already heard whispers and not fled. We learned the signs, the smells, the way the hum changes pitch. We took shifts. We spoke names together. We dimmed lights as one. The ground resisted, then adapted like a muscle learning a new load. Evan was found 3 days later asleep beneath the first tree at the grove, unharmed, cold, but breathing. He remembered nothing except a dream of trains running through tunnels that glowed amber. The sapling healed. The bleeding stopped, but the calling did not end. It had learned something new, that Pine Hollow could answer in chorus. And that frightened it. Winter deepened. Christmas approached again, and the ground waited to see who would speak when it called next. The ground did not accept the chorus quietly. On the first night after Evan returned, the hum sharpened into a vibration that rattled windows and teeth. It rose and fell in waves, testing timing, patience, resolve. When we answered together, the warmth steadied briefly, then surged again harder than before, as if the thing beneath Pine Hollow were pushing back against the weight of many voices. Christmas Eve arrived under a sky too clear, too still. Snow waited in the clouds, refusing to fall. The air smelled clean but thin, like breath held too long. We gathered by design, not by announcement, in homes near the grove, with lights dimmed low and generators silent. Each group kept watch and listened. At 11:30, the trees reacted. Branches across town trembled and leaned toward the grove. not in unison this time, but in opposing directions, pulled by competing currents beneath the soil. Needles fell like rain carpeting sidewalks. The sapling split again, reopening its wound, and this time the red ran faster, pooling warm against frozen ground. The calling intensified, spreading outward, searching for weak points. It pressed against solitary minds, first the grieving, the lonely, the angry. I felt it slide along my thoughts, then recoil as the chorus answered faster, stronger. At 11:45, a new sound joined the hum, wood cracking not from cold but from strain. Trees near the grove bowed deeply, roots surfacing and tearing free. The ground bulged between them, swelling like a lung filling. We spoke names louder now, overlapping, imperfect, human and flawed. It mattered. The thing beneath did not want perfection. It wanted silence. At 11:59, the ground broke, not at the cap but around it. Cracks spidered outward, lifting soil and stone. Amber light bled through, illuminating steam and frost colliding violently. The air roared as pressure released. From the rupture rose a column of heat and shadow, twisting into forms that resembled branches reaching upward, grasping, faces pressed within them briefly, not the dead, but reflections of the living distorted by fear. The chorus faltered. I shouted for them to keep speaking, to keep remembering. I stepped forward onto ground that burned through my boots and pressed my hands to the soil. The heat seared, but I held on, forcing breath into words. We are here. We remember. We do not look away. The response came as pain. The column lashed outward, knocking people to the ground, shattering windows, setting pine boughs alight with cold fire that burned without flame. The cap groaned metal, screaming against concrete. Someone screamed for help from the edge of the rupture. I saw Emily Shaw, face in the light, eyes wide accusing, before dissolving into shadow. The ground was lying. I spoke louder, dragging the truth out like a rope. Names, dates, chorus found its rhythm again, and the pressure shifted. The column thinned, fraying at the edges. At midnight, the snow finally fell. Heavy, wet flakes plunged into the heat, hissing and steaming as they struck. The sudden cold shocked the column, collapsing it inward. The ground heaved once, then settled violently. Silence crashed down. The sapling sealed its wound. The trees straightened slowly. The cap held, though scarred and cracked. People lay where they had fallen, shaking, crying, laughing without sound. I knelt in the snow, bleeding from my hands, and knew this had been a test. The ground had learned resistance, and it would adapt. Christmas had not ended the cycle. It had taught the enemy how to fight back. Christmas Day arrived without sunrise. A low ceiling of clouds pressed down on Pine Hollow, turning morning into a gray twilight that never fully lifted. The town moved slowly, as if recovering from a shared concussion. Windows were boarded where glass had shattered. Cars sat abandoned where engines had died the night before. No one spoke above a whisper. Sound felt dangerous now, like it might attract attention. We counted injuries and found no bodies. That should have comforted us. Instead, it filled me with dread. The ground had struck hard and taken nothing. That meant it had changed its aim. By noon, the hum returned, but but softer, almost thoughtful. It no longer pushed against us directly. It slipped between moments, hiding beneath footsteps and breath. The chorus gathered again, but the response felt delayed, as if our words were arriving late to a conversation already in progress. Then the dreams began. People fell asleep and did not wake screaming. They smiled. They whispered names in their sleep. They walked toward the grove without coats, without shoes, as if following a memory they had misplaced. We brought them back again and again until we realized the pattern. The ground was no longer calling out. It was calling inward. At the edge of town, a man named Robert Hayes collapsed beside a newly planted tree. When we reached him, his chest rose and fell, but his eyes were open, reflecting amber light that was not there. He spoke calmly, saying he finally understood where he belonged. Beneath his fingernails, the skin was stained red. I tried to speak to him, but the hum drowned my voice. The sapling beside him bent low, touching his shoulder, with a branch that trembled like a hand. We cut the branch and the hum spiked sharply. Robert gasped and returned to himself, crying, confused and terrified. The ground had marked him. By afternoon, several others showed the same signs. Subtle at first, warmth in the palms, a lingering smell of iron dreams that repeated. The ground was choosing intermediaries, people who could hear without speaking, who could draw others close without force. The chorus fractured. Fear crept in where unity had been. Some wanted to leave town at any cost. Others wanted to burn the grove salt, the soil break the cap. Old arguments resurfaced, sharpened by exhaustion. The ground listened and learned. At dusk, a fight broke out near the square. A generator was turned on, lights flared bright and hot against the dark. The hum surged, instantly swelling with hunger. Trees along the street leaned toward the light, needles trembling. I ran into the glare and shut the generator down with my bare hands, burning skin and fuse alike. The light died. The hum retreated. Silence fell hard and accusing. Someone shouted that this was madness, that we were prisoners of dirt and fear. Another voice answered that fear was the point. That night, the ground took its first offering since the rupture. A woman named Grace Holloway walked into the grove carrying nothing. She was found at dawn asleep beneath the second tree, smiling faintly. She was alive, but something was missing. She could not remember her children's faces. She could not remember the sound of her own name. Memory was currency now. I stood alone by the cap, watching steam rise in thin threads, and understood the new shape of the war. The ground no longer wanted bodies. It wanted minds, willing or not. I spoke to the chorus and told them the truth. We could not win by resisting alone. We had to starve it. No lights, no songs, no rituals, no speaking of names near the grove. We would make the town cold and quiet and dull. We would deny it warmth, memory, and attention. It would hurt us too, but hunger works both ways. As night closed in, Pine Hollow went dark by choice. Curtains drawn, fires banked, voices still. The grove waited, confused and patient. Christmas Day ended without bells, without gifts, without joy. And for the first time, the ground did not know what to do next. The silence worked. For 3 days, Pine Hollow became a town of shadows and closed doors. No lights after dusk, no music, no gatherings. People moved carefully, speaking only when necessary, and never near the grove. Fires were banked low, generators stayed cold, even the church bell rope was tied off, so no curious hand could pull it by habit. The hum faded. It did not vanish, but it thinned to a distant suggestion, like a memory you are not sure belongs to you. The sapling stopped leaning. The concrete cap cooled and settled. Steam no longer rose from its seams. The ground was learning what hunger felt like. On the fourth night, I felt the calling again, but weaker and unfocused. It brushed my thoughts without finding purchase. I answered with nothing. I stood at the edge of the grove and listened without speaking. The trees were still. At dawn, snow finally fell light and dry, covering tracks and stains alike. People ventured out cautiously, exchanging looks instead of words. Children were kept inside. The town breathed shallow and slow. Grace Holloway returned to us piece by piece. First, she remembered her children, laughter, then their faces, then their names. Each memory came back with a headache and tears, but it came back. The ground had taken what it could and given it back when it found no nourishment. By Christmas night, the hunger sharpened into desperation. The hum surged briefly, then cut out entirely, leaving a pressure so sudden it made ears ring. The trees shuddered and then went still. I realized the ground was making a final calculation. It needed a voice, not a chorus, not a crowd, a single steady witness who would carry the memory away from the soil and keep it alive elsewhere. Attention fed it, but absence starved it. The balance lay between. I understood what it was asking for. I packed lightly the notebook of names, the lantern, the keys I had used to carve truth into ice and concrete. I left the cabin before dawn without telling anyone. The town slept under its first real peace in years. At the edge of the grove, I spoke once. I will remember, so you do not have to. The ground answered with warmth that did not burn. The hum faded completely. The sapling nearest me bowed slightly and straightened. I turned away and did not look back. I left Pine Hollow before sunrise, driving through snow that erased the road behind me. By noon, the signal on my phone returned, and with it, the world. News headlines spoke of storms and outages and nothing else. Pine Hollow did not trend. It did not become a story. That was the price. Months passed, then years. I did not return. I moved often. I avoided places where the ground stayed warm in winter. I kept the lights low. I wrote names and dates in new notebooks and buried copies in places the soil did not listen. Sometimes at midnight I smell iron. Sometimes trees bend slightly when I pass. When that happens, I stop and stand still and remember until the feeling passes. Pine Hollow still plants trees every Christmas. They keep them dim and undecorated. Children are taught songs about listening. No one talks about why. The ground there sleeps now. It will wake again someday. Things like that always do, but when it does, the memory will not be waiting for it. I will be, and I will remember. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.